Welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping straight into the source material to explore a truly mind-bending psychological what-if scenario. We're going to cross-reference the strict canon rules of Death Note with some pretty wild fandom theories. Our goal? To completely stress-test the mind of Light Yagami.
Okay, let's just dive right in with a massive question. What if using that notebook meant you were actually forced into the presence of the spirits you created? You know, in the series, Light acts with absolute impunity, right? He's just writing names from the comfort and safety of his bedroom, but what if that distance was totally shattered? What if the consequence of playing God was an eternity of being haunted, up close and personal, by your victims? Well, to figure out exactly how this would break Light's mind, we first have to look at how his universe actually operates.
Section 1. The Rule of Mu, the Canon of Nothingness.
To really test this whole theory out, we've got to lock down how the afterlife actually works in the established lore. According to the official Death Note wiki, the universe operates on this strict rule called Mu. It's a Japanese concept that essentially translates to nothingness. The rules of the notebook literally spell it out. All humans, without exception, will eventually die. And when they do, there's no heaven, there's no hell, they just cease to exist. They don't go anywhere because there is literally nowhere to go.
Now, what's super interesting here is what the series creator Tsugumi Oba had to say about this. In the How to Read guide, Oba explicitly shut down any fandom myths about an afterlife. He stated he wanted to be completely uncompromising because, in his words, revival is cheating. He wanted death in the story to carry an absolute, permanent weight. So no do-overs, no resurrections, and definitely no lingering souls.
And hey, Light actually figures this out himself in a really fascinating retconned manga conversation fans love to point out. Originally, Light laughed this sort of nervous laugh when Ryuk mentioned the afterlife, but in a later flashback, Light calmly and confidently works out that Ryuk's warnings just mean heaven and hell don't exist. Ryuk actually confirms this and praises Light's intellect. So, Light understands super early on that his actions carry absolutely zero spiritual consequences. He is completely safe from divine judgment.
Section 2. The creation of Kira, coping with murder. So why does Light desperately need this concept of nothingness to protect his own psyche? Well, if you look at character discussions on forums like Reddit, a lot of people suggest that creating the omnipotent Kira persona was really just a massive coping mechanism. Remember, Light's first 2 kills were basically accidents while he was just testing the notebook out. He didn't actually think it was going to work. When it did, the sheer trauma of taking human life required this drastic mental gymnastics routine. To justify the murders, and to avoid facing his own crushing guilt, he basically deluded himself into believing he had to become a righteous god.
You can literally see this in action when we compare his 2 personas. When Light loses his memories of the notebook, he reverts to being a genuinely decent guy. He flat out refuses to manipulate Misa's feelings for the investigation because he finds it unethical. But then you contrast that with Kira. Kira is ruthless, driven entirely by a messiah complex, and corrupted to his core by power. It perfectly proves that the notebook and the absolute power it represents fundamentally warped him.
Academic analysis from places like the Annals of RSCB actually backs this up, pointing out that his god complex completely swallowed him whole. He desired to be the god of a world without crime, a vision fashioned entirely by this messiah complex. Because there was no afterlife, no Mu to eventually punish him, he just lost his fundamental sense of humanity. The research even notes how he began to actively enjoy his cruelty over rivals like L. It's a pretty chilling reminder of how absolute power, combined with absolute immunity from consequence, can just completely erode a person's morality. Having that distance from our actions makes it so much easier to commit wrongs.
Section 3. The ghost variable, rules of the afterlife.
All right, here's where things get really wild. I found this crossover theory absolutely fascinating because fans love debating how the Death Note would operate in other fictional universes, like Bleach or Danny Phantom. In Bleach, humans have spiritual bodies that stick around after their physical bodies die, and in Danny Phantom, ghosts are described as this post-human consciousness, basically thoughts and emotions that linger after death. If we apply these supernatural rules, the Death Note might induce a heart attack to kill the physical body, sure, but the spirit, energy, or emotional imprint, that would be completely unaffected.
If we drop this variable into Death Note, the absolute safety of Mu vanishes entirely. If the notebook only destroys the physical vessel, but leaves behind an emotional imprint bound by its traumatic end, Light wouldn't just be erasing criminals off a screen. He'd be unleashing a horde of traumatized, lingering ghosts. His bedroom wouldn't be this cozy sanctuary anymore. It would literally be ground zero for thousands of furious spirits.
Section 4. Haunting Light Yagami, facing the victims.
Let's apply this haunting reality to his actual victims, Looking at how sources like CBR chronicle his vigilantism, we're gonna strip away the cool factor of his genius intellect and force him to look at the collateral damage of his god complex. Imagine Light being haunted by FBI agent Raye Penber. Light didn't just kill Raye. He coldly forced him to write down the names of his entire FBI team before he died. Raye's lingering spirit would carry the agonizing, crushing realization that he was tricked into murdering his own colleagues. Having that kind of psychic weight staring Light down every single day, that would be entirely unignorable.
Or take Naomi Misora. This one is brutal. She was a brilliant investigator mourning her fiancé, Raye, and she actually trusted Light because he claimed to work with L. Light manipulated her grief, got her real name, and then literally mocked her in her final 40 seconds by revealing he was Kira. He forced her to commit suicide in total isolation so her body would never be found. The sheer betrayal and despair of her spirit would be an unrelenting torment for him.
And then there's his dad, Soichiro Yagami. This might be the most devastating one. Soichiro suffered endlessly, even going as far as cutting his own lifespan in half with the Shinigami eyes, all just to stop Kira. He died happy, falsely believing his son was innocent. If his spirit lingered and finally learned the horrifying truth that the son he sacrificed literally everything for was the very monster he was hunting, the absolute heartbreak of that ghost would shatter any illusion Light had of being a benevolent savior.
We absolutely have to talk about L. As the academic sources noted earlier, Light's battle with L completely devolved from a clash of justice into a petty, ego-driven struggle for pride. Light didn't even beat L on his own merits. He basically cowered behind a Shinigami, tricking Ram into sacrificing herself to save Misa. L's post-human consciousness would be there constantly, mockingly reminding Light that his so-called divine victory was actually achieved through totally dishonest cheating.
Section 5. A God or a Killer. The Ultimate Truth.
Forcing Light to exist in the world surrounded by these spirits would be the ultimate stress test for his fragile psychology. Stripped of the absolute nothingness of Mu that constantly protected his conscience, Light's massive delusion would completely collapse. As we saw from his memory loss phase, deep down, Light actually does possess a moral compass. The whole Kira persona is just a shield to protect himself from the reality of his actions. Under the crushing visible weight of his victims' lingering emotions and trauma, that shield would break. He wouldn't see a glorious new world anymore. He would just see the human lives he destroyed.
So, that leaves us with this huge, haunting final thought to wrap things up. The Death Note provided Light with distance, anonymity, and the comforting guarantee of nothingness. But if you take all of that away, if the self-proclaimed god of the New World had to face the ghosts of his actions and truly look his victims in the eye, could he still claim to be justice? It totally changes how you view his entire reign of terror, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of the canon, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.